Okay, everybody.
Like, ask her.
We are ready to begin, and our final event of the day. And if any of you feel like you can move in a little closer, if you're not too settled into the spot you've been today, feel free. This is going to be a little bit more intimate, closer time. We have had quite a few people who've left, primarily bus drivers who had to get out and start doing their job. What were they thinking of? So I would like to introduce the people on the panel, because these are all people that I know that I wanted to be on the panel. Starting down at the left, my right, is Amy Miller. Amy is a person I've known for quite a while, just kind of peripherally. We happen to go to the same church, and my daughter Eleanore actually got her assistance dog with a little bit of help from Amy. Amy had an assistance dog, and I went up to her and said, "Can you tell me where you got your dog?" And she put me in connection with the cares, and Eleanor's wonderful dog Max added so much to the last year of her life, and was a huge comfort to me for several years after she died. So that's a special bond I feel I've always had. And Amy's going to be able to share with us her perspective as an adult wheelchair user and some of her transportation experiences. Next we have Jenny Whitmire. Her son is one of my clients, and I've known him since he was a baby. He's a beautiful little boy in grade school now. And she has kind of had the whole gamut of experiences. I think maybe one of the first times I ever met you, we were working on adapting his car seat to help him be able to be more comfortable. And she has a van that's adapted with tie-downs for her son, and she'll be able to share some things from the perspective of a parent and her experience. Sue, everybody knows. I don't need to introduce her again. You've all gotten to know her. I guess I'm on the panel here because I'm really concerned about this whole topic. And I had the experience with my own daughter in transportation issues, and I continue to work on those issues on an ongoing basis with the kids I work with now. And finally, we have Colleen Lewis here from Corvallis. In my work with kids in Western Montana, I have been so impressed with what the Corvallis school buses do in terms of safety, and a really great job of transporting the kids I work with who are in wheelchairs. And they are on some really slippery roads in the winter. They go up the mountain toward Pinesdale and up above Hamilton, and the buses go off the road, I think at least a couple times a year, and it's not because they're bad drivers, it's because of the roads and the conditions. And I've had the experience of some of my clients getting a new wheelchair, and the school bus drivers actually did not let this girl be transported in her wheelchair until some transportation issues were worked out. That really impressed me, and I wanted her to be here to be able to share from the school bus transportation perspective. So I would like it if each of you could just share a little bit about your story, at least Colleen, maybe a little bit of your experience of special needs bus transportation, and the rest of us can just share a little bit, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. We'd really like to hear any questions or comments or discussion, any ideas you have. This is really the opportunity to open things up and perhaps get some good dialogue on this topic, and especially anything that is a real burning issue for you. We all have our burning issues. I have mine, and you might have yours.
Does that mean I'm first? I like how they all look this direction, so I go. Well, as Tamara said, my name's Amy Miller. I've been a wheelchair user. I just had my 18th anniversary this July. I broke my neck in a diving accident. Just swimming in the Yellowstone River, stood up on the edge of my raft and broke my neck, and went from being a 23-year-old, 1 month out of college, professional, to a quadriplegic in the matter of an instant, and I'm telling you, it made a huge change in my life. But the interesting thing was, for me, my perspective from the very beginning was, this is going to be very different. Things are going to be very different, but it's okay. I'm still going to have a good life. And fortunately, I would have to say that I have definitely worked my tail off to make that come true. And I have a fantastic life, and so I feel very blessed in that regard. But I found that when Tamara and Jamie asked me if I would speak on this panel, I thought that it was kind of ideal because I've been through my own gamut of transportation issues. When I was first injured, I went to Craig Hospital, which is where I did my rehabilitation for 4 months. And at that point, I was learning how to instruct someone else to feed me, instruct someone else to dress me, instruct someone else to, help me with my everyday needs, let alone even thinking about riding in a wheelchair van or a wheelchair that I didn't even have my own wheelchair at that point. And so probably for the first couple of years after I left the rehabilitation hospital, I had a big Ford F-250, I don't know what you called it, just one of those big Econoline cruiser vans that was modified. And I told Tamara today that, well, I have a few experiences. When I first got in that van, I was like, this chair is so heavy, there's nothing that could move it. I'm not concerned. I'm not going to tie myself down. It's not going to be a problem. And then I had a few wake-up calls, I guess you might call it. I would even be like, well, we could just put down one tie down in the back and one in the front, and that will stabilize me just fine. And I remember being with a friend who was driving me, and we decided to go to lunch, and when we had to slam on the brakes all of a sudden, and so I went flying forward. My chair was fine. I kept looking at Sue's crash test dummies thinking, that's me, that's me. And then at another instance, we had to accelerate really quickly because somebody was turning into our lane and we had to get out of the way. This was not all in the same day, thank God. But I tipped my chair over backwards, and that wasn't even the bad part because there was a big bench seat back there. And so my chair tipped back onto the bench seat, but when I came flying back forward, that was the really exciting part. So I've gone from that stage in my life to, I need a seatbelt here, I need a seatbelt here, I need a seatbelt across here, I need my chair tied down, I need a lockdown. And so I think I've reached a happy medium now. I think that I even would have to say that sometimes in public transportation, I've found the very same experience that Sue showed us earlier this morning where the gal was videotaping and they said, oh, just park over there in that spot, and they flipped the seat up and said, you'll be just fine. And I thought to myself, oh yeah, I'll be just fine. But then, in retrospect, thinking more and more about that, how they put themselves at liability risk and they put me at physical risk. And so I'm just really pleased to be here because of all of those things in my life, and also because I, as a person who needs a wheelchair lift in my own vehicle, I found that after I got rid of the big Ford van, I bought a minivan that was adapted, and I went to Phoenix to buy that. And between Phoenix and Montana, on the way home, it broke down. And that's kind of frustrating because by the time we got to Montana, there was no one to service my vehicle. And that was back in the day when Grizzly Auto was out there on West Broadway, and they took great care of us, and they did everything they could to try to accommodate our needs and work on our ramp. And then when I bought my second van, I bought it in Seattle, and between Seattle and Spokane, it broke down. And so I don't know if I just was a jinx on my own new vehicles or what, but so that was an impetus for myself, my husband, and some friends of ours to start our business where we can provide service and assistance to people that have mobility needs as well. And so I'm pleased to be here, and if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
Okay,
Hello.
now it's on. I'm Jennifer Whitmire, and like Tamara said, I have an 8-year-old son who is quadriplegic, and I met Tamara when Kyle was a baby, and we just could not find a car seat to fit him. He has poor head control and CP, so he has a lot of issues with muscle tone and that sort of thing. And I'm very glad to hear about all of these things that they talked about today, because I had no idea there were car beds. That would have really helped me out when Kyle was a baby. And I've just gone through the gamut trying to find ramps and vans and things that work in my car. I've had a lot of trouble in Missoula getting things installed, and that's why I'm glad to meet you.
Glad to meet you too.
And we actually haven't had the money to go and buy a really expensive van that has the really high technology ramps that come out by themselves and that sort of thing. So we have tried to make manual ramps work as long as we can, and we still have one. And we've just tried to make things work that are less expensive. And it would be really nice to hear if we can find some way to get some of these things paid for, some funding for some of these things for new parents or even people that have had accidents that simply can't get Medicaid or something to pay for their equipment. So, thanks for inviting me.
Do you want to say anything?
I'm going to wait for questions.
I need to make excuses for Colleen. She apologized, but she had to leave. So, sorry that we're not going to be able to hear her perspective. But I just did want to reiterate again how impressed I've been with the Corvallis school system. I really was quite astonished that they would not allow it. Actually, what happened with this particular girl is that she shifted from having a WC-19 compliant wheelchair to having an ultralight wheelchair. And I know not all of you are wheelchair people, but functionally it was a much better choice for her, and she could be much more efficient and have a lot more freedom, but she no longer had the tie downs on the chair. And she had to shift over to sitting on the bus seat in order to be transported. The Corvallis school system wouldn't transport her otherwise. And if you can believe it, they went through a span of time where she kept on riding in her old WC-19 compliant wheelchair tied down, and then they would tie down her new wheelchair separately from her because they weren't yet feeling confident of the harness system that they had for her when she was sitting in the bus seat. And it took a while to work all this out. But I was really impressed with the problem solving, and I was impressed that they were paying that much attention and really thinking this through enough, which is part of the reason I wanted her to be here, so I'm sorry she can't be here. You've already heard a little bit about my transportation issues. I shared about them this morning, but I would just like to say second and third and fourth, what Jenny is saying about funding. I think probably one of the most difficult things for me is seeing, as I alluded to this morning, how things have gone downhill over the years, and it's actually more difficult to find funding for van adaptations and special needs car seats. It's harder to find the funding for those things now than it was even just a few years ago. So I think that's an important thing for all of us to realize, is that we're trying to show what's best practice here at this conference and what's safe and what we want for the kids, but the missing piece there is how people can afford it.
Oh.
Talk loud.
Any type of hand-me-down system for these items for, older individuals who passed away, people who don't use them anymore, for like mechanical ramps, accessible vans, anything like that?
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
There are lots of informal ways. I know people who have been given accessible vans as gifts. I know people who have bought them secondhand. One of the most common things that I see is that very often those secondhand vans, for instance, either don't have proper tie downs, or if they do have tie downs, they have no occupant restraint. And I could just tell you some really horrifying stories, about a boy I work with here in Missoula who drives a power chair, a grade schooler, and his dad describing to me how they would be driving along in their van that has a lift, and how he would reach back to steady his son's power chair as he was turning corners. I mean, my jaw dropped. This was the first clue. This was a few years ago, the first clue I'd had that they were dealing with this. But I see that happen a lot. People are given, or they buy a wheelchair van and they think, oh good, we're really set, and it's not completely equipped, or else they don't know how to use it.
So there's no program to try to collect those things, like if I had a van and I wanted to donate, there's nobody I could call and say, would you take my van and match it to a...
Not at this point, no.
You can call me. I'll help you find someone who needs it.
Oh, I know. But I was just curious. I just thought that would be a good program
Yeah.
to have.
It would be a wonderful program, and especially if there would be some way, if it could be for a nonprofit, so people might be able to donate a vehicle for a tax write-off, and then it could go to somebody who needs it, yeah.
But it can, make sure that you fit the right.
Make sure that it's safe. Yeah.
I think it would be important, yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is that I think that it would be important to make sure that you have someone like Tamara or an OT look at the vehicle with, possible recipients, just to be sure that they are secure, safe.
So, Tamara, does Parents Let's Unite for Kids or Montech have any role in advertising or letting people know this equipment can be available?
You mean used equipment? I don't know that Pluck does that at all, and that there is some kind of an exchange thing going on, I think, for Montech. That is a possibility, but I think still you're missing the key point of having a team approach, being able to make sure that everything is appropriate and safe for the person.
I agree. And then Montana Independent Living Project, I think they used to advertise in their newsletters when people have things.
They do, and they do. Yeah, like Summit Independent Living Center will advertise used vans and stuff. Yeah. One thing I'm sorry. Can I just say one thing before my husband asks a question? One thing I just wanted to make clear, because this is a question that is often asked of me. People assume that Medicaid will pay for some of this stuff, and certainly private insurances don't. But just to make it clear, Medicaid does not pay for these things. They changed the rules about a year and a half ago. Some of us advocated very strongly for Medicaid to be willing to pay for the transit tie-downs, for the WC-19 compliant tie-downs for new wheelchairs here in Montana. And we succeeded. So in January 2008, that was changed, and so now, when I'm getting kids new wheelchairs, I can get the tie-downs, and Medicaid is covering that, which is wonderful, and we're so grateful for that. But sometimes people ask me if Medicaid will pay for a special needs car seat or a car bed. Many people still remember the days, 20 years ago when Medicaid used to pay for tie-downs to put in a van for a power chair, and none of that is available anymore.
Can I say one thing to that, Tamara?
Yeah.
There are, depending on the individual's needs, there are some Medicaid waiver funds that are available for people that are homebound, and their only option would be to have something through this program. And so if you have a client or a person that you're working with that is homebound and maybe is eligible for the Medicaid waiver program, that is the one way that we have had Medicaid supply tie-downs and modifications for people.
Yeah, Amy's exactly right. The Home and Community-Based Services Medicaid waiver. If a person qualifies for that program, that is the only source I know of right now for being able to get these needs met. The child and family service providers like CDC in our area or Family Outreach, sometimes if the kids are on the Medicaid waiver program through those agencies, there can be help with purchasing a special needs car seat or whatever, but they're not doing anything at all with vehicles. So when I was saying that Medicaid doesn't cover those things, I meant regular state plan Medicaid that most people have if they're not on a Medicaid waiver program.
Right.
The other thing too is, I think for adults, that sometimes folk rehab will pay for things. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. And that's about all I know about that.
And
my question is, what can people do to support this kind of change? Are there things like legislative advocacy, or what sort of things can other people do to help that might facilitate more change, more funding for better restraints and so on?
The only thing I can say, and this is really from my experience at Convade with the wheelchairs, where we had places where Medicaid refused to pay for those chairs, many times the families would go to fair hearings, and it's a big deal. to get a family to do that. But in so many cases, when a family went to fair hearing, they prevailed. So, if it's really an important need, and it's worthy, the state advocacy people, legal people sometimes will help. And when you do that, it also helps other people too, who then have the same situation if there's been a judgment or the hearing. So if you can encourage families to do that and stand up for what they need.
And I think, I've been really glad, we've had a police officer here both this morning and this afternoon, and I think that there need to be more people from different walks of life who begin to see that this is really important, and it's not only just the wheelchair users or the families of kids with disabilities who, heaven knows, have enough on their plate. And having been in that role myself, I know how much time and energy the advocacy I did for my daughter and her needs took away from my time that I had to spend with her and my husband and my other children. And I've had a conviction for quite a while that it can't be only just the users who are trying to write to legislators or advocating or whatever, but we need to try and move toward having other people, your neighbors, your coworkers, other people seeing that it is just as important for people with disabilities to be transported safely in their vehicles as it is for everybody else who is covered by the regular Montana seatbelt law. Anybody, have any specific situations you've run into that you haven't been sure of, or kids you've worked with, situations?
I would just say, as far as people kind of coming together and trying to fight the legislative idea that was brought up, there are a couple groups out there, which Sue can probably talk about, that are kind of more done by the manufacturers, and support from actually end users and things is something they're always looking to get. And Amy, you'd be terrific because of how well spoken you are and everything and the story you have to tell. So there are a couple of coalitions in essence out there that do kind of go to Washington. They've done a lot of things where they've gathered people and kind of protested and things like that. And one is NARTS and the other one is RATC, which Sue, you might want to speak a little bit more on.
Those associations, which are mostly made up of the manufacturers and providers of equipment, they both have annual conferences, and attached to that, they have a visit to Washington. So, if you want to contact those organizations, those associations, and just find out when their conference is, find out, maybe you can go and visit your legislators. But I've gone several times to Washington, D.C. with those groups, and it was just amazing to me to realize that as a citizen, I have a right to go and see my legislator and let them know. You have to make an appointment and follow a certain protocol, but certainly we all have rights to go and speak to those people at the state level, at the local level, at the state level, and also, go to their offices in Washington, D.C. and let them know what's happening and how important these services are to your families.
That's actually where I met Sue.
That's right.
I was at the CELA conference in Washington, D.C. and meeting with at Senator Baucus's office and our other legislative people there. And actually, I think a lot of us in Montana think that maybe we can't have very much clout because we live in a really big state with really few people. But for whatever people might think pro or con about Max Baucus's politics, he is our senior senator and he has a lot of power on the Senate Finance Committee. And I do really think it's worthwhile making our needs and concerns known to him and to John Tester and to Denny Rehberg. And I really believe that there is some power in numbers. They need to keep on hearing from lots of people. They've told me they keep like a little list and they'll do a little tally, how many phone calls or how many emails they get on a specific issue. Well, if I'm just like one little person, calling about this, well, that's small peanuts. But if you've got a bunch of people who are all emailing and calling, then that starts to have a bigger impact. And I think that's one of the things with our little world, our concerns, is that we don't have really large numbers. And that's why I think if we could try and draw in some of the other people in our lives who maybe aren't living with these specific issues, but we can begin to let them know how urgent it is so that we can add to our numbers. I'm a cockeyed optimist. I think maybe it might help.
And I just want to add that especially PTs, OTs, speech therapists, it's really important to communicate with the physicians, because my physicians, my son's pediatricians, who had probably 4 different ones, had no idea about positioning, had no idea that he had trouble sitting in a car seat, even though I stressed he would scream in the car seat, he would do this. They never offered options or information on where to find car seats that fit correctly, or ramps, or anything, nothing. So as professionals, like therapists and nurses and people like that, when you are talking to the people who you're getting scripts from all the time, you should push them to give information to people, especially that have little kids that have no idea what to do. It's really important.
And big kids that don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that for myself.
Okay, Tamara, why don't we go ahead and reverse it just a little bit? Hi everyone, I'm Colleen, by the way. Not that Colleen, don't ask me any questions. But why don't we go ahead and reverse it and see if anybody that's in the audience might have recommendations that you might have for individuals, parents, wheelchair riders, so things that you've learned from your experiences of being involved in the field that you think might be helpful in some of the things that they've been bringing forward, either by resources or perhaps just by recommendations as far as how to handle certain situations and things of that nature. So does anyone have anything like that that you'd like to share or put out there? You guys are a talkative group.
I just have another question.
I'm going to force you to use my
How much education, I'm not sure if you guys know this, how much education is given to the user when they get the wheelchair out to, advocate for themselves when they go onto a bus or whatever, and telling people how to help their
None. I got none. I would really say that.
I'm trying to do that with all of the kids I work with who get chairs, but I probably fall down on it and don't do it as well as I should. I'm trying.
Tamara taught us how to strap Kyle's chair into our first strap system, even though she didn't put it in for us, but the person who put it in for us didn't explain anything. And when we just had a manual foldable ramp, which we have now too, but it's different. And the first time I took Kyle, I had all of his restraints correct and the seatbelt correct, but I went over one of those speed bumps over by Target, and the ramp hit him in the head because it would sway back and forth and it wasn't stationary. And I took the ramp back, and the guy said, no, this is how it's supposed to be. There's nothing really else you can do. And so it wasn't actually the restraint or getting in a wreck, but it was the actual ramp that hit him in the head. So you don't really get a whole lot of information when you...
I mean, I even know people I don't know very many people who ever have the money to do this. I've actually known one family who was able to buy a brand new adapted van, and saw their daughter in the van, and her chair was tied down. She has a power chair, and she didn't have the occupant restraint over her, and I asked them about it, and they said, oh, they never told us anything about that. How would you do it? What's it for? I mean, they had paid a lot of money for this van so that they could transport their daughter safely, and they had no clue about the occupant restraints. I thought that was amazing that right from the manufacturer, there was no education and support.
I would have to say that Tamara has been a great resource for me, personally and professionally, about occupant restraints, because I don't even think that, as you all heard, I don't even think I've used my own occupant restraint properly. And the more I heard today, and the more I've read in the recent past, just as we've been getting our business going, the more I've learned. And I think it really is an untapped market where people are not getting into that informational resource. And when you said today, look in the wheelchair manual, it'll tell you how to tie down the wheelchair, I thought, oh, that's a great place to look. I never even thought of that. Duh. Of course that's where you would look. But I mean, think about that. You're thinking about the vehicle. It's part of the vehicle as opposed to part of the wheelchair. And man, I bought my wheelchair, 8 years ago, and I couldn't tell you where my manual is, but I felt like that was a really good resource, which I hadn't really personally thought of.
I don't think your chair's WC-19 compliant.
I'm sure it's probably not.
So you might not have anything in your owner's manual that tells you anything.
I have a tie-down that's an electric tie-down.
It may tell you not to use it, so.
Really?
Yeah,
Don't use an
It's
easy lock?
WC-19,
It
you
might.
might find that in the user guide.
Okay, good to know.
Don't use it in every.
Well, I did look at those new wheelchairs out there, so I'm thinking I'll be getting a WC-19 chair soon.
Actually, it's only been relatively recently that there have been adult-sized chairs that have even been WC-19 compliant. It started off with pediatric chairs, like with the kid cart, the first chair that Jenny's little boy Kyle had. They were the first ones to start crash testing, and really it started in the pediatric market, and now it's gradually spread out so that now adult users can have that benefit too, but it's taken a long time. And I would like to say my standard horror story, and this is part of what had contributed to my passion about this whole topic, in addition to my experience with my daughter and other kids, was the story of a woman who was a client of mine here in Missoula. About 10 years ago, I got a phone call. This lady happens to live in a group home and had been on an outing in the van, and they'd been out and about and apparently were in some kind of an accident. I can't remember what the whole scenario was, but what they called to tell me was that the chair had stayed securely fastened to the floor of the van, but that her hip belt, her pelvic belt, and her chest harness had broken and she'd been thrown right out. Just like those crash-tested dummies that you saw. That actually happened to somebody I know. Now, she wasn't seriously injured, which of course is very, very fortunate, but I tell that story to a lot of people I work with now because this isn't just scare tactics. It's not. This is real, and I actually know somebody that this happened to. So.
One of the things this morning when I said, "What about passengers riding up front?" I was thinking more in terms of people that ride in the middle and the back of the vehicle. It's difficult to get occupant restraint for them. That's part of whatever comes with the vehicle because there are really no seat belts that reach from this side over to. And so I was wondering what your recommendation would be in regard to securing a person down in the middle and the back of a van, and ask you what do you know about like the H harnesses? What do you have they been tested, or what do you know?
Well, if the middle seat location doesn't have a lap shoulder belt, I wouldn't recommend using that seating space for transportation. In terms of the harness, as far as I know, and maybe someone else can correct me, there are no adult-size wheelchairs that have crash-tested harnesses. Easy On makes a harness that they say can be used for a wheelchair, but there's really some question about it's more just for holding the person in the chair, but it's not crash worthy really. They haven't tested with a wheelchair, so as far as I know there really is no solution for adults. For the smaller children, as I had said earlier, the WC-19 standard is going to change to require a harness, a 5-point harness for kids under 50 pounds. So at least for the smaller children, that will be better. But above that, as far as I know, there's no harnesses. Has anybody heard of any harnesses on a wheelchair that are crash-worthy?
Or even in a vehicle, that's what I was
In
thinking.
a vehicle, I've never heard of that. Sounds like a good idea. But I know that the crash force are just tremendous. And to have a wheelchair that can hold the higher weights
Right.
with the harness, it's going to be tough.
Definitely.
And speaking of crashes and things, I just wanted, for those of you who heard the earlier discussion debating about seat elevators, and if you should be transported, if you could be transported with your seat elevator up, our friend Scott from Permobile did call, and the response he got was that for the Permobile wheelchairs anyway, the ones with seat elevators, they are crash tested with the seat down. And their rationale for that is that if the seat is raised up, the seat elevator is actually attached to the power base by 4 bolts. And so just with the laws of physics, in the case of an impact, you are going to have a different sort of leverage that's going to increase the chances of failure so that it might break off. So that's what he said.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I got several people here, nobody's had a solution, but I have a problem. Can I give you my little soft little voice? Oh. That's usually not the case, that I have a soft little voice. I work at a facility for adults with brain injuries, and we have a 15-passenger bus. And in the back, there is room to tie down 2 wheelchairs. And our other clients, we transfer into seats. But they also have wheelchairs, and we have some that can walk on, but then we hold their wheelchairs. So my problem is, what do we do with the extra wheelchairs? You know, is there, we use gate belts and bungee cords to strap them to the back of the other chairs. We have another van that we will load up with the extra wheelchairs and bring it with us along fishing gear, picnic supplies, or whatever it is. But it just worries me that if someday we have an accident and you've got these flying wheelchairs moving around, does anybody else come up with that? Or does anybody have any creative solutions that we might be able to do? Do what? That's a cargo rack. Yeah.
So you're saying short of using a wheelchair space, because you don't have any more? Is that what you're saying?
We don't have.
No more wheelchair spaces?
There's only 2 spaces for wheelchairs, and the rest we transfer our residents into seating, which is the safest way to transport them. But it's just
I like the second vehicle taking the wheelchairs. That sounds like a good
It
solution.
seems to be the safest, because if we have an accident, we would have all those wheelchairs trying to climb over to the residents. No creative solutions?
I don't have anything that comes immediately to mind, but there are some car top carrier type things that do carry wheelchairs. And how many chairs do you transport other than the ones that have people in them?
We have 6.
Oh, wow.
It would be 6 chairs, and
Yeah.
it's a bus, so it's very,
So it's
very
high anyway, right?
Very high, yes.
Some of those car top carriers have an arm that would like reach down that you could attach it to, and it pulls the chair up. I don't know if you could get 6 wheelchair carriers on one car or van, but
Then
that's,
we probably wouldn't clear the ramp that we're overhanging at the gas station.
yeah, that's right. You're probably right.
Can't do drive-through McDonald's or anything.
No car washes.
Are these all folding wheelchairs? They all fold pretty flat?
That's helpful.
Because it seems like even if you were, like if you're putting 6 or 8 folding wheelchairs in a separate vehicle, you might want to at least try and do something to secure them down.
Yes, in
So
the
that-
other vehicle.
Yeah.
Do you have a solution?
What about the things that you can fit on the back of, like in a trailer hitch, you have to hitch on?
Yeah.
Or is that something-
I actually was thinking about that, but I'm assuming that probably the back of your vehicle has a lift of some sort to get the people in and out. Yeah. And so,
It's on the side.
oh, it's a side lift.
Side lift. Yes, and we could, we thought about doing that on the back, then you have weather control going down Lockdown Highways with the snow and ice, so we have to be something that is contained.
Let me get your name, and I'll look for some information for you. Absolutely.
That's why I'm here.
Me too. I'm curious what you guys do. The bus drivers obviously are gone. So what do the rest of you do? How did you get connected with this conference today? Yeah, how about you guys?
I work at Child Development Center as a family support specialist. So I have a lot of kids on my case, so we have transportation needs.
Cool.
So that's why I'm here.
Good, thanks.
I'm a pediatric physical therapist.
Excellent.
Physical therapist.
Cool.
Special ed para and Eleanor's project manager.
Excellent.
I work with Sue at Columbia Medical.
All right.
And I work with Tamara and Rick. And the former Ani was our other coworker. And he was our dog.
And you're the car seat specialist, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Health department in Great Falls.
Okay.
I'm a school-based OT.
And a school-based special education.
Oh, cool.
John Laughlin, Medicaid outreach, mainly on the eligibility side, but I'm getting more into the services side, so I'm taking notes.
Oh, all right.
John,
Just in case you
so
want-
John, I want to talk to you some more.
Woohoo! We're glad to have you here. In my alter ego, I'm a teacher, so that's why it's natural for me to make you talk. So.
And if you have any problem with Medicaid, you just go to John because he'll return your calls.
Excellent. Empty your mailbox, John. Right? You'll probably get a whole lot of calls.
Physical therapy student. I work at New Directions.
What is New Directions? I've heard that.
Exercise facility, physical therapy.
Oh, right. Right, thank you. At the university, right? Yeah, sorry.
Not PTA. I'm transportation facilitator at a cross-border one planner. I got the job, so learning what special ideas that we need to ramp up on finding out that everybody does everything for the schools, and we need to do more for the transportation program.
Excellent. Oh, that's great.
I'm a paraprofessional at an elementary school with preschoolers, and I ride the bus home with them.
I'm Gloria Rogers, who replaces my full-time restoratively and fun. She's our routine.
I'm an occupational therapist and old jack of all trades.
I'm a physical therapist in some school sports. I'm a para and I drive the bus.
How about back in the corner?
I'm a special ed para that rides the bus out of CBD.
Cool.
I'm a bus driver.
So you got to stay.
I got a sub.
Great to have you.
I'm a bus driver and owner.
All right. Mr. Kaczynski, you're going to tell us who you are? I'm sorry, but your uniform gives you away.
I'm Rick Aldred. I'm part of Eleanor's project. I'm camera assessment.
Robin.
Robin Bonner, physical therapist in the Missoula County Public Schools preschool. I want to make sure we're getting our kids to and from safely.
School-based OT, Missoula. I'm a special education preschool teacher, Liberty Park.
Oh, good.
Ruth Dika, paraeducator and special needs preschool educators.
Sorry, I mutilated your name earlier.
Occupational therapist and a fan of Eleanor's project.
Absolutely.
And I'm an OT. And I just really want to thank Tamara and everyone for this conference and making this affordable for all of us to be here with time. I love the way you tied it into Eleanor's project and the beach transportation system. That is, I think that was really great. And just everything that you put into this, from the rose on the table to pictures on the table to all the vendors. Fabulous job.
Well, I have to say some thank yous though too. First of all is my husband over there in the corner, who is Eleanor's dad. I was Eleanor's mom and he was Eleanor's dad, and Eleanor's project is really dear to our heart. It's been a big part of the healing process for us in losing her, and we really feel like she keeps on living through all of these activities that we're doing to try and help other kids who have similar challenges to hers. And I also wanted to acknowledge some other people. First of all, one of them is our second daughter, Julian Marie, who now lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, but she was the creator of our Institute logo that's on the banner out there. She's quite a talented young lady. And Jamie Romney Fitzgerald, who is my right-hand woman, and left hand too, I think. Everything, detail person, she's so great. This would not have happened without Jamie, and it would not have happened without Colleen Rudio, who has just led us through the process and taught us so much and helped us make this to be as good as we really wanted it to be. So thank you, Colleen. And all these wonderful people that I kept roping in. So.
With that in mind, I think do we have any other questions for the panelists? So I think one of the other things that Tamara was hoping to do is maybe get some insight as far as other topics that you think might be useful and helpful as we continue to, consider next year's topic lineup and other things that might be at the surface that you know are important things for either educational purposes or issues that are unresolved, or getting the right people in the right room together would perhaps bring forth some solution. So any topic recommendations?
We are really, really open because, we intend to have an institute like this every fall and keep on trying to bring high quality training here to Montana. And different topics needs to be related to issues related to kids with disabilities and adults with disabilities as well, but it should definitely relate to kids. And we didn't call it Institute for Professionals and Families for no reason. It's because we really feel that it's important for professionals and families to come together and learn together and communicate. And Andrea, you raised your hand there.
I did. My suggestion is something about ADA, because there's a lot of, especially families with children with disabilities, who are not at all familiar with or know very little about the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that might be a suggestion.
Okay. Jamie, can you write that down? Yes.
I know, I feel privileged to be here. A Saturday would be awesome. I know that you have Saturdays also. So I think about probably 75 more people besides just me, because it's hard to find subs, as you can tell, and things like that. We could bring a lot.
Do you think people would come on a Saturday? Because we kind of debated about that, and it's hard to know because some people, sometimes some people will whose way is being paid by their job or whatever. It's better during the week, and they don't want to give up a weekend. It's always hard. If you guys think Saturday would be better, absolutely, we could do that.
Third weekend in October, third week in October, when does the OTs and PTs have to go to any conventions?
Yeah, I know they have their OTPT school program.
Okay. Primaries are free though.
But then we might want to get the therapists here too.
We do.
But the Saturday's a good idea.
And the other question is, how do we help to get the families here as well? Because I think that's a real important part for Tamara, to see the families as well as the professionals in the same room having that good conversation. So any recommendations as far as how we can increase getting some of the family members here?
Because we really tried to keep it super affordable for families, but of course people have jobs and stuff. Maybe Saturdays would be better, especially if we could offer scholarships to help with respite care or something, with babysitting.
Well, Saturdays would be good because the parents do work, but I know that our school district can pay our families to come.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, they tried to tell me to convince you to come up, but.
Wow. Well, that's nice.
Our parents are really involved in it. Our PTs could share with the parents and get them involved. The schools and the PTs and OTs and teachers and the parents are really good. They kind of let that throughout the last year, I've been, transportation's not invited to IEPs or anything.
Are you in Kalispell or Whitefish? Where are you?
Council.
Okay.
So we're basically pre-delivered kids, and I've been told more than 100 kids this year. It start tomorrow. I mean, we're talking harnesses to, you know, hip surgeons and stuff, and they want to start tomorrow morning. And they assume that we can still are about to have with nothing.
Yes, please.
I think she made a good point there. A place to start as therapists and parents is to advocate for our transportation people to be present at IEPs. That's, or IFSPs if you're working through CDC or family outreach or something like that. There are ways that those people need to be involved. And I can think of one family, it's been years ago, but the mother became the paraprofessional, and then she became the aide on the bus to be with her daughter, and then she became the person who advocated and required the aides to have the training to be with her child, and then she was the trainer for her child. By the time her child was through grade school and into high school, she had a whole team of paraprofessionals and bus drivers and aides who knew exactly how to handle her child and help her child succeed in school. So she was a normal intelligence, very physically involved young lady, and has graduated high school, and I'm not sure what happened to that team, but I'm sure it's one of the best trained teams. But that was a parent advocating. But that's it, you have to, you know, invite all the members of the team and remember that bus drivers or someone representing them is a member of the team to make sure this is happening.
Do you also think, so Tamara and I had another idea about helping or having classes to help the parents understand how they can be advocates and how that conversation would go, to where we would actually have a panel of individuals like yourself, to where you could have the parents saying, how do I advocate for this situation, or how do I ask questions about that situation, and have it come directly from the professionals. So would individuals like yourselves be willing to sit on panels with parents in the rooms to answer some of those questions and provide some guidance as well? What do you think about that idea?
Great idea. It takes a lot to train families to advocate. It doesn't happen in one conference, but it's a point that needs to be.
Yeah, go over here first. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I know you touched on this at the beginning of the panel, but one of the things that I run into daily in my job is we have pamphlets, we have brochures, we have websites for all of this wonderful, you know, best practice equipment. And we have families that don't have Medicaid. I know we've already touched on the Medicaid issue as well. And they would love to be able to obtain some of this. So maybe if we can have, and we have the vendors out there, but maybe if we could have some of the financial resources, vendors, or some more resource information, so that when families do come to this and they see this, you know, we have a starting point to work on. I mean, as it is now, you know, we're always calling Tamara, you know, come and check this out for this family. You know, is this going to work? Is this going to be okay for the family? But it may work, but the families have no way to afford it. We don't know where to go for resources because there's such a different plethora of eligibility requirements for some of the resources. So maybe we could pool some of those and have them available so that the families don't feel hopeless, because they do get their hopes up sometimes and then there's no way to fund it.
And that's another idea, is to have more vendors that are financial resources.
Yes.
To where they actually have the individuals out in the vendor area that can answer the specific questions about where do I go to get a resource for, or to get grant money, or to get funding for X, Y, Z.
Right, or if that's not a possibility, just to have, you know, a more refined list of some of the resources. I mean, I know they're limited, I know that sounds like an easy task, and I know it won't be, but just a place to start.
Great idea, thank you.
That's what I'm going to listen to Colleen.
No, I'm sorry.
I was under the impression, because I've only been there a year and I'm just really not work, but they pretty much told me, you know, I have a wheelchair that's really top heavy, this tall student in it, that's really unsafe, you know, 50. Until you started talking about Colleen saying that kid had to, put in a seat, and then like a WC-19 chair. I just, you know, whatever you said, you have to do that for them. the liabilities are drivers and our aides and their transportation. That's one thing I remember when I used that at more. But it's just, you don't have to do it.
There are some people that wouldn't, oh, sorry. There are some people that there really would be no way to transfer them from their chair into a bus seat particularly, let alone a car seat or even a bucket seat. And that could be the case. You know, that's one of the things that I keep thinking about today is that every single wheelchair rider is an individual with completely different needs than the person sitting next to him who might be in the very same wheelchair. And you know, I was thinking about that in terms of myself. It would be pretty much impossible for me to transfer into a seat in the vehicle. I used to transfer, my husband would transfer me because we had a little sports car. So he would transfer me out of my chair and into the car, and we left the chair wherever we were just to go for a drive. But I would never be able to sit on a bus seat at all. I would be completely a puddle on the floor.
So if we decided not to transport him, say we didn't transport him because the seat wasn't safe, would he qualify for the home act like you were talking about?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
It all depends on what his disability is, and there are some interesting rules and the way that the rules are interpreted and stuff for who qualifies for what. So it's kind of a process, and you have to get screened and everything to find out if you qualify or not. I will tell you that the majority of kids who need wheelchairs that I know of don't qualify for that program. There's a handful of them who do, who are deemed to either have only strictly a physical disability and no kind of cognitive issues at all, then they will qualify for that program, or if they sustained their disability through something like, say, a traumatic head injury from a car accident or abuse or something after they were born. If they were sort of born just fine, but then they had an injury, then they would qualify. But I work with lots and lots of kids, and the majority of children don't seem to qualify for that one, unfortunately. But, you know, like Amy was saying, it's a real individual thing. I mean, you need to talk to the therapist in Kalispell, and I know that you've got some good ones up there, because I know some of them, they're former colleagues of mine, and, you know, see if there is any way that he could transfer, and maybe not. Maybe it's an issue of having to look at how the chair can be tied down, or, you know, it might be a real problem-solving process. And see, here are the funding issues again. You know, I have kids who are in wheelchairs who are really not very transportable, but if, you know, for whatever reason, if there's not funding for a new wheelchair, if you're trying to cobble together things, yeah, it's hard.
Any other thoughts from the floor as far as next year's institute? All right, then Tamara, anything else from the panelists? Do you guys have any final comments before Tamara kind of closes things out for us?
I just wanted to make one comment that, you know, from my point of view, being an equipment manufacturer, that we really appreciate the work that you do out in the field and the challenges that you have. And when situations come up where you have suggestions, certainly my company, and I'm sure the other manufacturers feel the same way. They want to hear from you so that they can make products that are you know, better, safer, easier to use. So I have my email address on my handout. Please feel free to email me with car seat questions, wheelchair questions. What I don't know, I will try and find out answers. But I learned from your questions just as much as you know, learned from the answers I provide. So please email me if things come up that you know, we've discussed in the conference. So, okay.
I just wanted to thank all of you for letting me do the teacher thing and go around the room and ask you who you are and where you're from, because I just feel like I kind of want to reiterate what Sue said, is that it's so useful for us, you know, as providers, to know what are the needs, what are people looking for, And I just, we really do learn a lot, like you said, from the questions. All day my brain's been ticking away at, oh, look up this, look up that, let's find something about this. So thank you all for being here.
Well, I've said thank you so many times, but before I do that anymore, Sue was just telling me that a couple of you have asked to have copies of the crash testing videos, and if you contact her by email, she will see that you get those. So it's a wonderful resource. And I just do want to say thank you again to Sue and to Mary Kay. It's just wonderful to have people who are able to speak authoritatively on this subject, who really have the time and have put the energy into getting the training, and it's just been wonderful. So we're so glad to be able to have this opportunity. I wanted to be sure and ask everyone to fill out your evaluation forms, because we really do want that information very seriously to make this as good as it can be. And even if you haven't been able to think of any topic ideas right now, if you go home and you start thinking, oh, I know what I'd like to have a training on, and if you think it might be relevant to what we want to do, please feel free to contact us. And I have to tell you that now that we have your emails, that you're probably going to hear from Eleanor's Project every once in a while. And if you don't want to, just tell us, and we'll take you off the list. You will be hearing a little bit about what we're doing from time to time, and of course we'll be able to hear about next year's Institute as the plans happen. Would also like to say that if any of you are in the Missoula area or fairly close, those of us involved with Eleanor's Project are actually looking for board members. We're in a place right now where we really need to expand our board. And if you think that you might be interested in possibly serving on our board or being part of the an advisory committee or volunteering in some capacity, please do feel free to contact us. We'd certainly be interested in talking with you. And finally, I guess I already said thank you to Colleen and Jamie, but I want to say thank you again. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.